Hey y'all! So in today's video, we will continue our Python for Data Science series and discuss Python functions. More specifically, I will go over an introduction, discuss what a function is, give the basic syntax of a function, show how to create a simple function, discuss functions with parameters, default parameters, calling functions, return values, functions with multiple return values, keyword arguments, arbitrary arguments, best practices for using functions, and some practical examples. That was a lot. As always, this video is timestamped, so if you would like to skip to a specific section, feel free to by clicking the timestamp in the description. So let's get right into it and let's tech talk with Tyler. So what exactly is a function in Python? Well, a function is a block of organized, reusable code that is used to perform a single related action. So think of it as a mini program within your main program. Functions allows us to break our program into smaller modular chunks that can be used repeatedly without having to rewrite the same code over and over again. So let's break down the components of a function. So to define a function, we start with the def keyword, followed by the function's name and a pair of parentheses. The function name should be descriptive of what the function does. So for example, def greet. In this example, our function is named greet, which indicates that it will greet someone. Parameters are variables that we can pass into the function to customize its behavior. They go inside the parentheses. So with our greet function, we can take a parameter called name, def greet, and then in parentheses, name. After the parentheses, we add a colon. That indicates the start of the function's code block. So the code inside the function must be indented. This just tells Python that these lines belong to the function. And by convention, we use 4 spaces for indentation. Typically in IDEs, when you press the return key, it'll automatically indent. The body of the function contains the code that will be executed when function is called. In our greet function, we use the print statement to display the greeting message. To use our function, we need to call it and provide any necessary parameters. Here's how we call the function with the name Alice. Greet Alice. Optionally, a function can return a value using the return keyword. This is useful if we want to get a result back from the function. Optionally, a function can return a value using the return keyword. This is useful if we want to get a result back from the function. So for example, our greet function can be modified to return the greeting message instead of printing it. So now when we call greet Alice, it'll return the string hello Alice. And that's it. You've just learned how to define and use a basic function in Python. Easy, right? I agree. So as we previously discussed, parameters are a key concept in programming because they allow us to pass information into functions by making them more flexible and powerful. So let's break down the components of a function with parameters. So in our greet function, we use the print statement to display a greeting message. We use an f string to include the value of the name parameter in the message. So to use our function, we need to call it and provide an argument for the parameter. So when we call greet Alice, it'll execute the code inside the function and print hello Alice to the screen. So now let's break down the components of a function with default parameter values. So in this example, our function is named greet, which indicates that it'll greet someone. For the 3rd time, we're using the same function. We assign a default value to the name parameter by setting it equal to world. This means that if no argument is passed when the function is called, name will default to world. So the body of the function contains the code that will be executed when the function is called. In our new greet function, we use the print statement to display a greeting message. We use an f string to include the value of the name parameter in the message. And to use our function, we can call it without providing an argument. In this case, the function will use the default value for the name. So let's just say we call greet. And when we call this, it'll execute the code inside the function and print hello world to the screen because we didn't include a parameter. We can also call the function and provide an argument to override the default value. So here's how we call the greet function with the name Alice. Greet and then Alice in quotations within the parentheses. So when we call this, it'll execute the code inside the function, and instead of printing hello world, it'll print hello Alice to the screen. So calling a function means executing the code inside the function. Let's see how we can do this with and without arguments. So to call a function, we use its name, followed by parentheses. If the function does not require any arguments, we simply use empty parentheses. So in the first example, greet, the greet function is called without any arguments. If greet is defined with no parameters or default parameter values, it will execute the code and use the default behavior. However, if the function does require an argument, we provide the argument inside the parentheses when calling the function. The return statement allows us to send a value back from a function to the part of the program that called it. This is useful when we want to get a result from a function and use it elsewhere in our code. So let's break down the components of a function that uses the return statement. So inside the function, we use the return keyword followed by the value or expression we want to send back. This ends the function and returns the specified value. To use our function, we call it and pass the required arguments. We can store the return value in a variable for further use, such as result equals add 5, 3. We can then use the return value in our code. So for example, we can print the result. All right, so now that I just said that, let's combine all these steps into a complete example. With the function add, we will return a plus b. In this example, we define a function named add that takes two parameters. We got a and b. So the function calculates the sum of a and b and returns the result using the return statement. And then when we call add 5, 3, the function calculates 5 plus 3 and returns the result, which is 8. We can store this result in a variable named result and then print it. So when we run the code, it'll output 8. So in Python, a tuple is a collection of values that are grouped together. So by using tuples, we can return multiple values from a function in a single return statement. So let's break down the components of a function that returns multiple values using tuples. So inside the function, we use the return keyword, followed by the values we want to send back, separated by commas, of course. And you may be wondering, how are the values returned? Well, they're returned as a tuple. So how do we call a function and unpack it? So to use our function, we call it and can unpack the return tuple into separate variables. This allows us to work with each value individually. We can then use the return values in our code. So you may be wondering, how exactly does this work? Let's combine these steps in a complete example. So we're going to create a function called get_coordinates, and we're going to say return 10, 20. In this example, we define a function named getCoordinates that return two values as a tuple. And then we will set x and y equals to getCoordinates function, and we will print x and y. So when we call the getCoordinates function, the function returns the tuple 10 and 20. We can unpack this tuple into two variables, x and y, and then print these values. So when we run the code, what do you think it'll output? 10 and 20. So keyword arguments allows us to specify arguments by name when calling a function, making our code more readable and flexible. So let's break down the components of using keyword arguments. When defining the function, inside the parentheses, we specify the parameters that the function will accept. When calling the function, we can specify the arguments by name using the format parameter_name equals value. This makes it clear which values are being passed to which parameters. And we call the function and provide the arguments using their parameter names. This is particularly useful when a function has many parameters and we want to make the code more readable for both ourselves, other people, and our future selves. There are many benefits when using this syntax. Number one, clarity. Keyword arguments make the code more readable by clearly showing which value is assigned to which parameter. Flexibility is another benefit. We can provide arguments in any order when using keyword arguments. Also, avoiding argument order issues. So by using keyword arguments, we don't have to remember the exact order of parameters in the function definition. And this could be useful when you have 5 arguments, for example. So let's combine these steps into a complete example. So in this example, we define a function named greet that takes 2 parameters, first_name and last_name. So when we call greet, first name equals John, last name equals Doe, when we run this code, it'll output hello John Doe. So let's break down how to define and use arbitrary arguments with examples. Using the asterisk args in your function definition to accept any number of positional arguments. The asterisk args, or I'm just going to call it args to y'all, parameter collects additional positional arguments as a tuple. So when we define a function, let's say print underscore numbers, for example, that accepts any number of positional arguments using args. The arguments are accessed as a tuple. So using the kw args in your function definition to accept any number of keyword arguments. The kw args parameter collects additional keyword arguments as a dictionary. We define a function, print underscore info, that accepts any number of keyword arguments using the keyword args, kw args. The arguments are accessed as a dictionary. So some key points for you to remember. For the variable length arguments, args and kw args allows your functions to accept an arbitrary number of positional and keyword arguments, making them very flexible. So understanding how to use the args and kw args helps you write more flexible and dynamic functions in Python. These tools are particularly useful when you do not know in advance how many arguments will be passed to a function. So you may be wondering, okay, what are some best practices for writing functions? Tell me, Tyler. I got you. Following these best practices will help you write more clear, maintainable, and efficient code. So let's cover 3 important practices that I recommend. Number 1, using descriptive names. It's important to use clear and descriptive names for your functions and parameters. This makes your code more easy to read and understand for you, others, and your future self. Number 2, keeping functions short and focused. Each function should perform one single task and be as concise as possible. This makes your functions easier to test, debug, and reuse. So for example, if you have a function that calculates the area of a circle, it should focus only on that task. Keep that in mind, please. Number 3 is writing doc strings. So a doc string is a string literal that appears right after the function definition. It describes the function's purpose, its parameters, and its return values. Doc strings are important for documenting your code and helping others, and like I said, your future self, understand what the function does. That is all that I have. I hope that by now you have a better understanding of Python functions than you did a couple of minutes ago. If you have any questions, comments, or even new topic suggestions, whether it be Java, Python, Tableau, whatever, please leave a comment down below. Also, if you aren't already, subscribe to my channel. It's free, and click the bell icon to be notified when I post another Python series video. Thanks for interacting with Tech Talk with Tyler, and I'll see y'all later.